welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down the key arguments from the book While Israel Slept. It's a deep dive into the catastrophic failures that led to the events of October 7th, 2023. All right, let's get right into it. To really understand this, we have to start where the book does, in the early hours of that Saturday morning. This is one of the last messages sent by Liri Aldbag, a 19-year-old soldier, from her post right on the Gaza border. Her family, they actually thought she was joking. She wasn't. You see, Lizri was a Tutsi Patanet. She was part of a special unit of young female soldiers, and they were known as the eyes of the army. Now, their entire job was to sit in front of these screens day in and day out, watching every single thing that moved near the Gaza fence, and to report anything that looked even slightly out of the ordinary. But on October 7th, their warnings, and the warnings they had apparently been filing for weeks, were just catastrophically ignored. The book details how some surviving observers later said they had literally watched Hamas fighters train for the assault on an exact scaled model of their own base. And their reports? They were dismissed. So when the attack finally came, their base was completely overrun. And you know, the tragedy of these young women, these Tatzpitaniotes, it's really a perfect small-scale example of the massive paradox the book digs into. A truly unprecedented failure. I mean, think about it. The state of Israel is built on this reputation for impenetrable security. You've got the mighty IDF, one of the most advanced militaries on the planet. You have Mossad and Shin Bet, intelligence agencies whose capabilities are the stuff of legends. And yet, as the book argues, despite all that power, all that expertise, the country was taken completely by surprise by its weakest enemy. The attack resulted in the single deadliest day for Jewish people since the Holocaust. So it all comes down to this one massive question that the authors try to answer, and the one we're going to unpack for the rest of this explainer. How on earth was this possible? Well, the book makes it very clear that the answer isn't just one mistake. It was more like a series of cascading breakdowns. And the first, most obvious layer of failure was intelligence. Just look at this timeline. The signals were there, blinking red for over a year. A full year before the attack, military intelligence had a report detailing an invasion plan that was almost identical to what actually happened. Then, just 3 months before, a veteran analyst filed urgent warnings that were basically brushed aside. And even on the very night of the attack, unusual activity was detected, but it just wasn't enough to trigger a full-scale alert. And we're not just talking about missed reports or memos lost in a pile. This was about dismissing direct visual evidence. According to the book, when the observers on the ground reported these incredibly alarming training exercises, they were allegedly told by commanders to just, quote, keep watching their computer screens. But here's where the book goes deeper. It argues that all these specific intelligence screw-ups, they weren't the real disease. They were just the symptoms of a much deeper strategic blindness that had taken hold of Israel's leadership for years. This blindness actually has a name in Israel, the conceptia, or the conception. It was this core, almost unshakable belief that Hamas was, at the end of the day, a rational actor. The thinking went that they were deterred by Israel's military power, and that they could be managed because they were way more interested in governing Gaza and its economy than in starting an all-out war. So this conceptia, this way of thinking, it wasn't just an idea. It drove Israeli policy for years. It meant focusing the country's huge security resources on what were seen as bigger threats, like Iran's nuclear program, while just trying to contain Hamas, believing the group could be kept in check with things like work permits and economic aid. And that containment policy had a very real and very controversial financial side to it. The book basically frames it as a policy of paying blackmail to a terrorist organization. The authors detail how, for years, the Israeli government allowed and even helped with the transfer of hundreds of millions of dollars in cash from Qatar directly into Gaza. We're talking about suitcases full of cash, delivered right to Hamas, all with the belief that this money would buy quiet and stability. This created a really strange, contradictory policy. I mean, on one hand, you have Israel actively putting financial pressure on the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. But on the other hand, it's greenlighting a massive flow of cash to the hostile, terrorist-run regime right next door in Gaza. Now, the book argues this policy wasn't just about buying quiet. It was also a political strategy. And it presents this 2019 quote from Benjamin Netanyahu to make its case that by propping up a separate, hostile power in Gaza, it weakened the Palestinian Authority and prevented a unified front that could actually negotiate for statehood. Okay, so after all of that, what's the big takeaway? What's the bottom line from this analysis of the catastrophe? The author's main argument is this: October 7th was not a single intelligence mistake or the failure of a few commanders. No, it was the total collapse of a national security concept. It was the result of a deeply flawed containment policy, which was itself born from a strategic blindness that made the entire security establishment unable to connect the dots they already had.
And this really highlights the ultimate challenge the book leaves you with. Preventing the next disaster isn't just about fixing intelligence gaps or moving troops around. It's about dismantling the fundamental assumption, the conceptia itself. And it forces you to ask whether a nation can ever truly change the core beliefs that define it.